You open your eyes to mist. A soft, rolling breath of it, curling across low hills and winding around crooked fence posts. There's dew on your sleeves, the kind that makes everything feel a little heavier than you remember. The sun isn't up yet, but it's trying. A low glow hints behind the clouds, turning everything to that quiet silver color, usually reserved for dreams and overly sentimental movie scenes. The world smells of damp wool, old bread, and muddy leather. And no, you're not camping. You're in a medieval pilgrim. Congratulations. You shift your weight on the uneven cobbled road, noticing the ache in your knees. Yes, you've been walking for days. Maybe weeks. There's a hole in your left shoe the size of a walnut, and your traveling companion, who snores like a wet ox, is still asleep under a scratchy blanket, mouth open in poetic surrender. You probably won't make it through this day. But that's fine. Most pilgrims don't. They collapse into bushes, taverns, or minor spiritual revelations long before they reach their destination. But you're different. You're determined to collect your seashell. That's right. A seashell. Not a relic, not a gold coin, not even a questionable sausage from a roadside stand. You're here for a mollusk's leftover wardrobe. Why? Well, get to that. But first, gently before your body stiffens into an arthritic question mark, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. And what time it is. We pilgrims like to feel less alone. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You begin again at the edge of a sleepy village with no name. Or rather, a name too old and crumbled for anyone to pronounce without spitting. The houses are slumped in on themselves like tired dogs. Smoke curls lazily from one crooked chimney, and the smell of wikanyan soup clings to the thatch. You pass a boy with a wooden hoop and stick, chasing dreams far more mobile than your own. He gives you a look that says, why is this adult wearing a sack and carrying a scallop minus-shaped badge? It's a fair question. The scallop shell is the symbol of pilgrimage, specifically the way of street. James A. Long, blister-minus producing trail that ends at Santiago de Compostela in Spain, where St. James the Apostle allegedly rests. Allegedly. Historians still debate whether his bones actually made it to Spain or were just excellent at inspiring tourism. You keep walking. Your hand tightens on the worn leather strap of your satchel. Inside, you carry the essentials: a crust of bread that could double as a weapon, a copper brooch, a quaint iron cloth, and a folded letter you can tread but pretend to understand. It smells like home. An older man in a patched tunic hobbles beside you. He speaks only in proverbs. Even the snail arrives at Rome, he says, with an approving nod. He smells like beeswax and regret. You pass a woman kneeling beside a stream, washing her feet. One is wrapped in rags. She's humming something slow and repetitive, part lullaby, part ancient curse. You consider humming along. And then it hits you, the first real sensation of all on this endless road: a wide, flat stone embedded in the path, worn smooth by the passage of thousands of feet. The indent is deeper than your thumb, proof that others walked this way centuries before. All for a seashell, which, oddly enough, was just symbolic. It was practical. Pilgrims used scallop shells as makeshift bowls for water or soup. They also made it easier to spot fellow pilgrims. Think of it as a medieval conference badge. But saltier. Obscure fact time: some pilgrims, especially in later centuries, faked their entire pilgrimage just to wear the shell. These were known as shell cheats. They were like medieval influencers, except instead of posting beach pics, they lied about walking 800 kilometers. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. You've already traded your last piece of dried pear for a blanket that smells like sheep in midlife crisis. Up ahead, a fork in the road. To the left, a shadowy grove. To the right, a slight incline that looks worse than it is. You choose the incline because this is a story and symbolism matters. You ascend slowly. A bird calls somewhere behind you. It might be a night guard or a monk with allergies. Hard to tell. When you reach the top, you see it the first way marker. A tall stone column carved with a scallop shell, pointing west. It's chipped worn and leaning like it's had a long life. You touch the stone. It's cool, smooth, and somehow encouraging. Like an old friend who offers no advice but still shows up. You smile. Just barely. Welcome to the road. You're going to hate it. And love it. But mostly hate it, and then miss it terribly when it's over. The morning grows legs. Slowly, awkwardly like a newborn deer. The light thickens, brushing golden fingers across hedges and empty windows. Somewhere behind you, the snoring stops. A miracle. You trudge forward, the path turning gravelly and uneven. Every step kicks up a soft crunch, a whisper of other feet that came before. Some wore sandals, some boots, some walked barefoot out of penance or poor planning. You suspect a combination of both. As you reach a mossy bend, a man emerges from the trees carrying a staff taller than himself in the face, so lined it could serve as topography. He nods once. You nod back. The medieval version of I see you, fellow disaster. He doesn't speak, but he does hand you a small pouch of crushed mint leaves. For chewing. It helps with road breath. He might have said if he were the speaking type. You thank him with your eyes and tuck the pouch into your tunic. Medieval dental care, you realize, is surprisingly mint-minus forward. A small chapel appears on the horizon. Not grand, not even symmetrical, but charming in its lopsided way. You veer toward it instinctively. Pilgrims often relied on these way chapels for rest, reflection, or to escape sudden weather that seemed personally offended by your journey. Inside, the air smells of damp stone and beeswax. Candles flicker along a crude altar. You kneel, not entirely out of piety, mostly because your back needs a break. Your knees creak like ungraced hinges. An old woman in a cloak sits silently on a bench. She's peeling something with a small knife, a pear maybe, or a very shriveled onion. She doesn't look up. You close your eyes, whisper a prayer, or maybe just count backward from 10. Either way, the silence is kind. Fact of the hour, pilgrims walking the Camino de Santiago often received indulgences, essentially spiritual discounts on time in purgatory. But only if their motives were pure. As in, not just sightseeing. Historians still argue over how pure anyone's motives really were. You step back into the light. A sudden downpour. Of course. You pull your cloak tighter, which does nothing. Your companion catches up, holding a clump of dandelions and grinning like HES discovered gold. For the saints, he says before sneezing directly into them. You walk a little faster. Along the path, you spot a carved post. It's wrapped in ribbons, bones, and the occasional sock. Pilgrims often left small offerings here, buttons, drawings, the occasional romantic regret. You touch one, a faded ribbon embroidered with a name you can't pronounce. You whisper it anyway. Obscure tidbit: in some parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that scallop shells carried protective magic. They were said to ward off fever, snake bites, and the world's worst travel companions. You pass a small stream and pause to refill your flask using your own scallop shell. It works. Poorly. You manage 3 drops and a mosquito. The road curves again, and you find yourself walking beside a crumbling stone wall, half-minus swallowed by moss. Beyond it, a field of sheep stare at you with judgmental calm. One of them sneezes. You feel seen. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of garlic and wet wool. A tavern must be nearby. You debate stopping. But no, not yet. Your feet say yes, but your stubborn pride says keep going. Or maybe that's your blister talking. Ahead, a tree marked with dozens of scallop shells strung like wind chimes. They clink gently, a song only pilgrims hear. You add your own, hanging it beside a red minus painted one etched with tiny stars. You step back, nod once, and keep walking. The wind softens into something almost musical. It tugs lightly at your hood and threads itself through the brambles, humming low through the reeds like a bored cowboy in the back pew. You don't mind. You've stopped expecting nature to behave like it's on your side. It does what it wants. Mostly wind. Occasionally bees. The path narrows here. It squeezes between stone walls stacked without mortar, balanced by the optimism of farmers and the patience of sheep. Lichen glows pale green across the top edges, and a snail slowly, bravely, makes its way toward nowhere in particular. You step around it like royalty. Your companion is quiet now. He chewed the dandelions, possibly on a dare. He regrets it. So do you, because he won't stop smacking his lips like a cursed goat. The air smells of hay manure, and something inexplicably sweet, probably wild fennel. It mingles with the earthy scent of old leather and foot sweat, creating a complex bouquet you could name Pilgrim now. 5. A village comes into view. It's more of a suggestion than a place. 3 cottages, one leaning fence, and a cat that looks like it's been around since the first crusade. The cat blinks slowly at you, in that unimpressed way that cats have perfected over centuries. You pass the cottages. A woman stoops beside a fire pit, stirring something in a pot so viscous it defies physics. She glances up, nods, then goes back to ignoring you. Pilgrims are like rain here, frequent, often muddy and occasionally carrying lice. But then, from the side of the road, a surprise a weathered wooden sign reading Pilgrim's Rest. The letters are uneven, etched by hand. A little bell dangles from the corner. You duck beneath the awning. A bench. A barrel. An old man offering turnips to on a cup of something that might be wine, or vinegar's angrier cousin. Use it. The bench creaks, but holds. The stew is warm and surprisingly ambitious in flavor. You slurp it slowly, pretending you have teeth better suited for chewing. And then he says it. You got a shell yet? Your spoon pauses. Not yet. He chuckles. Don't wait too long. You never know when the road decides it's done with you. Major historical fact, the scalloped shell became the badge of honor for pilgrims reaching Santiago de Compostela, symbolizing both the journey's hardship and the spiritual cleansing it was believed to offer. Completing the pilgrimage often came with a certificate, a blessing, and a newfound appreciation for socks. Historians still debate. The old man continues, unsolicited, whether St. James even made it to Spain. But we made it here, and that's something. You raise your cup to that. You leave the village with a sloshway belly and a slightly more philosophical limp. The sun is behind a cloud, soft and gentle, like a candle placed behind a curtain. It won't burn you, but it'll guide your steps. A ridge appears. You climb it slowly. At the top, the view opens fields stretching into forever, dotted with trees and an occasional chapel. You spot 3 other pilgrims like you, tiny as breadcrumbs on a quilt. Below, a small chapel of rough stone, its doors slightly ajar. You descend, heart curious. Inside, a carved wooden scallop shell above the door. Faded frescoes along the wall. A candle still flickering despite no breeze. And on the floor, near the altar, an old staff. No name, no note. Just a staff waiting. You kneel again, partly in reverence, mostly for spinal negotiations. A curious detail in some pilgrimage traditions. If a pilgrim died along the way, others would carry their belongings to Santiago in their place so their soul could still complete the journey. You hope someone would carry yours. At least your shoes. They've earned it. The candle flickers once. Then again, you think of all the people who stood here before you. Whispered hopes. Cried. Laughed. Lied. You stand and walk on. Afternoon. The part of the day where time becomes vague. You're no longer sure if you've walked 5 miles or 20, or if you're even in the same country anymore. The path has blurred into a string of vague impressions: sheep, mud, stones, feet, wind, feet again. The light turns buttery, rich and softened. It coats everything with a sleepy glaze. You blink slowly. Consider lying down in a field. Consider becoming a farmer. Consider doing literally anything that doesn't involve this much walking. A man on a donkey passes you. The donkey looks smug. The man does not. You trudge through a grove of chestnut trees. The leaves whisper secrets you'll never understand. Probably about you. You're not paranoid. You're observant. Then the scent salt. Your pace quickens. The coast must be near. And with the coast, the shells. But first, a hill. A big one. You groan like an injured monk but begin the climb. The grass brushes your calves. A beetle crawls over your foot like it owns the place. At the top there it is. The sea. Sprawling in silver, rippling like silk left out in the wind. It stretches until it meets the sky, both blurring into an endless breath of blue. Use it. You breathe. You don't cry, but your feet do. Along the edge of the cliff, someone's built a stone marker. It's rough, leaning, with a scallop shell nailed to the front. Below it, small offerings: a button, a scrap of ribbon, a note sealed in wax. You add something. A hairpin. You don't remember why you still had it, but it feels right. You place it gently beside the others. Weird tidbit: some pilgrims believe that if you threw your shell into the sea and it floated, your sins were forgiven. If it sank, you had more walking to do. You decide not to test it. Let the sins marinate. The wind tugs at your cloak. You think of everything you've carried so far, literally and otherwise. Your aching legs, your stubborn pride, the smell of that dandelion stew. It's all with you. It always will be. You descend the hill and follow the path down to a beach. The sand is coarse, studded with stones and shells. You see one. Not fancy. Not perfect. A little chipped. But it's yours. You pick it up. Hold it in your hand. The shell is cool, light, and somehow ancient. As if it remembers every pilgrim who's ever held one. As if it knows how far you've come. You press it to your chest. And smile. Because you made it. And you still have farther to go. You carry the shell with care, cradled in the fabric fold of your sleeve, as if it were a relic or a fragile egg. There's no official certificate, no velvet-lined box to commemorate your find, just the quiet satisfaction of a sandy object in the ocean's vague applause. A victory wrapped in sea salt. The shoreline path hugs the coast now, the sea whispering beside you with every step. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though. Let's be honest, you absolutely are, but because the air here feels heavy with memory. The kind that sinks into your clothes and lingers behind your ears. Your companion is back, having reappeared mysteriously after presumably negotiating a treaty with a nearby fishmonger for a crusty roll. He shows you the bread as if it were a trophy. You nod, impressed by both the bread and his continuing belief that this counts as a meal. Together you pass a cluster of cairn's small rock stacks, built by hands you'll never meet. Some are crooked. One has a carved scallop shell nestled neatly at the top like a crown. Another has a single sock wedged between two stones. You choose not to ask questions. The sock probably has a story it's not ready to share. One major historical fact: pilgrimage routes to Santiago de Compostela, like the Camino Francis, have existed for over 1,000 years, with inns, shrines, and entire villages forming along their paths. These roads weren't just walkways. They were arteries, pumping culture, rumor, and the occasional pickpocket across medieval Europe. Historians still debate. Your companion says casually between bites whether some pilgrims actually made it for faith or just to escape axes. You're not sure if a GS quoting a book or inventing footnotes again, but you appreciate the thought. The sun hovers above the sea like it's been told to wrap things up. The sky turns that specific kind of pink you only get in overly romantic oil paintings. A fisherman's boat drifts near the horizon, and for a moment, you pretend HES caught the actual sun on his line. You round a bend and find an old hermitage tucked into the cliffside. It looks abandoned door, if we're being generous minimalist. A crooked door. Moss on the roof. But a wooden scallop nailed to the front assures you that this place once mattered. Inside, a single bench and a tiny altar. Carved into the wood of the wall, key habitat in Agio to Rio Alta Simi. You can't translate it exactly, but you figure it means something between rest here and don't steal the candle. Use it. The shell in your hand. The sea humming below. It's enough. Then, faint footsteps. Another pilgrim enters, eyes tired, smile wide. They see your shell. You see theirs. A silent nod is exchanged, the universal language of aching joints and spiritual achievement. They sit across from you. No words. Just shared quiet. A strange little custom comes to mind in some towns. It was believed that if two pilgrims crossed paths and exchanged shells, their burdens would be halved. You're not sure if that's symbolic or logistical, but the moment feels light all the same. You don't exchange shells, but you do share the crusty roll. And in that act, everything feels sacred enough. You wake up inside the hermitage, limbs stiff, mouth dry, and knees audibly filing complaints. Morning arrives not with a sunrise, but with a muted blue sky across the floorboards. Your companion is already outside, chatting with the other pilgrim like they've always known each other. Probably comparing blisters, or debating whether turnips to count as divine punishment. You step outside, stretching until your spine sings its ancient song. Birds argue overhead in a fig tree. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays with such commitment that it feels like performance art. The path turns inland now, winding away from the sea, up into gentle hills lined with olive trees. The air smells of damp bark and thyme, earthy and clean, like someone wrung out the forest for freshness. You pass a milestone carved with a date you can't decipher. It's probably older than your country. Moss clings to its edges like a sleepy child refusing to let go. Along this stretch, the road splits into three, and for once, there are no signs. Just options. You pause. Your companion points left. The other pilgrim points right. You go center. Because sometimes the middle path is less about compromise and more about not wanting to fight. As you walk, the dirt path becomes lined with carved stones faces, symbols, squiggles that may or may not be Latin. Some look like prayers. One looks suspiciously like a fish riding a horse. Obscure cultural tidbit: in certain villages, pilgrims were expected to dance a jig or sing a hymn in exchange for bread. Not perform well, just perform. Grace was optional. Humiliation was inevitable. It was thought to soften the soul. Your companion hums a tune just in case. You pretend not to hear him. Around a bend, a well appears. Circular stonework, covered in ivy. A sign reads Agua Bendita. You know it means holy water, but the bucket looks questionably holy. You draw a little anyway. The water tastes like minerals and memory. You let it rinse your face. Somehow, it helps. Further on, you see a cluster of children playing with wooden wheels and sticks. They wave. One holds up a shell like it's Excalibur. You wave back, your shell still tucked safely under your cloak. A woman nearby calls them in for lunch. She eyes you curiously. You nod in greeting, and she offers a small loaf wrapped in cloth. No words exchanged. Just kindness. Just carbs. Historians still debate whether pilgrims actually walked the whole way, you mutter aloud. Or if they just hitched rides with passing merchants. Your companion snorts, probably imagining himself flagging down a medieval lubber with a donkey named Gregor. The hills begin to flatten. The wind returns. And just beyond the next curve a church. Small. Wooden. Lovely in a crumbling sort of way. Its bell is cracked but noble, its door wide open. You step inside. A cool hush greets you. Dust motes spiral in the beams of light. You walk slowly, tracing a finger along the worn pews. The shell feels heavier now. Not in weight, but in story. Use it near the front. Just for a moment. Just long enough to breathe. And you do. The church is empty, but it doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused. Like someone just stepped out for a moment and will return with a broom or a blessing. You run your hand along the stone font near the entrance. It's dry now, but you imagine once, centuries ago, someone dipped their fingers in it before continuing their long walk with swollen feet and silent hopes. Outside, the sun has returned in full pageantry. You step back onto the dusty path, blinking like someone who's seen God or just too much pollen. Your companion waits under a crooked tree, flicking crumbs at a squirrel that seems to judge him with theological precision. "You ready?" he asks. You nod, although no part of your body agrees. The road ahead is lined with low stone walls and fig trees. The figs are not ripe yet, which feels personally rude. Still, you pluck one and pretend it's delicious, because optimism is a pilgrimage in itself. A mile later, you pass a man balancing a basket of cheese on his head. He doesn't speak. He simply nods and walks past, like a dairy oracle. The smell trails behind him, soft and nutty, like a good mood you didn't expect. Major historical fact, by the 13th century, the scallop shell had become so iconic as a pilgrim symbol that it was regulated by the church. Only those who completed the journey were permitted to wear it, sort of like a medieval verification badge, but with less drama. The rules didn't always work. Some people, as expected, faked it. A black market for counterfeit shells popped up in a few coastal towns. Because of course it did. One can only assume the ancient scammer's slogan was "fake it till you canonize it." You reach a village by noon. It's one of those blink minus and minus you minus, miss minus, it hamlets to streets, a well, 3 chickens, and a man playing a flute with questionable accuracy. There's a small market where pilgrims trade things like buttons, onions, and songs about blisters. You exchange a short turn about your sore ankle for half a turnip and a wink. Obscure cultural tidbit in some regions of Spain. Pilgrims were given a piece of white linen to wear around their necks. It served no clear purpose, except to signal to townsfolk that they were not thieves, just tired people in need of food and less judgment. The scarf itched, and so naturally some pilgrims used it to blow their noses, which did not help their image. You find a bench by the village fountain and share what's left of your turnip. Your companion solemnly declares it the best turnip pie I've ever had in this village, which, technically, isn't a lie. Evening begins to hint at its arrival, painting the stones golden, stretching shadows along the road. You fill your water skin from the fountain and stand up slowly, with the sort of theatrical sigh that deserves an audience. Time to walk again. Just one more mile today, you tell yourself. Just one more. That one more mile turns into 3, because medieval measurements were apparently invented by sleep-minus-deprived goats. You finally reach the next resting stop, a crumbling way station tucked into a grove of trees, its walls scrawled with centuries of carved names, scallops, and drawings of very confused Minos-looking horses. A wooden sign swings above the door, reading Hospitium Sancti Maria, though one letter is hanging on for dear life. Inside, the air smells of lavender and hay, and someone has kindly left a basket of stale bread and onions on a crooked table. You nod in reverence to the universal laws of hospitality, carbs first, questions later. You claim a straw mat in the corner, laying down like a weary cat. Your companion does the same, dramatically fluffing his cloak as a pillow, muttering something about divine injustice and sore calves. A soft wind blows through the shutters. It carries the scent of pine resin and distant soup. You hear other pilgrims entering, boots thudding on the dusty floor. Quiet voices. A laugh. The gentle clinking of a shell against a wooden bowl. Someone starts humming a tune. You don't recognize it, but your body does. It's the kind of melody people sing when they're no longer worried about time, or achievement, or what they forgot to pack. Major historical fact, pilgrim hospices were common all across medieval Europe. Some were grand institutions run by religious orders. Others were little more than glorified barns with kindness inside. The Knights Hospitaller even had specific protocols for treating blisters. Step 1, wine. Step 2, prayer. Step 3, more wine. You lie back and stare at the beams overhead. One of them is engraved with a scallop shell and the date 12/27. Next to it, scratched in messy script, the name Agnes. No surname. No context. But she was here, and she carved something permanent. You wonder what Agnes carried in her pack. Whether she walked alone. Whether she, too, found the soggy turnip oddly moving. Your companion breaks the silence with a sleepy, musing historians still debate whether medieval shoes were designed to fall apart every 100 steps, or if it was just an industry-minus-wide prank. You chuckle. Then you yawn. Then, like a soft curtain falling over the day, your eyelids surrender. Outside, the wind continues through the trees, whispering to the leaves. The way station snores lightly in the dark. You sleep. You wake slowly, the way a candle flickers before remembering it's still lit. The ceiling beams greet you again, less ancient in the morning, but still holding their quiet wisdom. Around you, the other pilgrims stir. Cloaks are folded. Boots are grunted back into. The air smells like yesterday's onions and hope. Your companion is already outside, of course, chewing on something green and dubious, Minos-looking. He waves at you with the enthusiasm of someone who slept on fewer splinters than you did. You step out into a landscape newly washed in dawn. The grove shimmers slightly with dew, the trees still holding their breath before the day begins its usual fuss. You stretch your arms and your back and your ambitions. Today you walk again. The path is narrow here, hedged in by shrubs and low stone walls. Grass grows in the center, worn thin from centuries of pilgrim footsteps. Every blade could probably tell a story. Most would be about sore feet and questionable soup. You pass a stone marker with a small scallop carved into its face. It's leaning to one side, like even it is tired. Beneath the shell, a date 1451. That's older than the phrase midlife crisis, though not by much. One major historical fact: by the 15th century, pilgrimage to Santiago had become such a social phenomenon that entire industries grew around it. Innkeepers, cobblers, scallop sellers, relic merchants, and even composers who wrote songs for pilgrims to hum while pretending not to be lost. You follow a bend where the trees thin, and the road opens onto a field dotted with sheep. They stare at you like they've seen too many pilgrims before and frankly aren't impressed. You nod anyway. Respect the locals. Obscure cultural tidbit: in certain Basque villages, pilgrims were once sprinkled with flour upon entering town, a symbolic purification, but also a clever excuse to mark newcomers who might try to sneak off without paying for dinner. Your companion warns you to avoid towns with strong baking traditions. You crest a small hill and see, in the distance, a ruined chapel. Just 3 walls and a half-minus-hearted arch, but the sun hits it in such a way that it could be a palace. You approach slowly, reverently. You've learned not to rush old stones. Inside the ruins, there's nothing but dust and sky. Someone has left a scallop shell in a corner, placed on a folded linen cloth. The wind doesn't touch it. You sit near it for a moment, not to pray exactly, but to rest in the quiet that once was prayer. Your companion sits beside you, pulling out a chunk of stale bread and offering half. You both eat in silence, the ruins around you kind enough not to crumble further. Then, like every day before, you rise. You walk. Again. You're halfway through today's journey when your sandal decides to divorce your foot. The strap gives a dramatic sigh and snaps, flopping around like a medieval sea creature gasping for relevance. Your companion offers sympathy by way of laughter. You sit on a mossy rock and inspect the damage. Not catastrophic, but inconvenient enough to require creative thinking. You remove a strip of fabric from your pack and tie the sandal in place, with the flair of someone reinventing fashion on the fly. You look ridiculous, but also very, very Pilgrim -Y. The road slopes downward now, toward a stream that gurgles like it's been eavesdropping on your woes. You dip your toes in, the cold biting enough to feel almost medicinal. Major historical fact: in the Middle Ages, pilgrims often carried ampullae, tiny flasks used to collect holy water from sacred springs or wells. These were the medieval equivalent of souvenir snow globes, but holier and, presumably, less tacky. You do not have an ampulla. You have a very wet sandal. A wooden bridge crosses the stream, its planks creaking under your weight like a choir of annoyed frogs. On the other side, a signpost appears, nailed to a tree. It reads A Santiago, a UN fort en Sulis, which translates loosely to De Santiago, dreams still remain. Your companion raises an eyebrow. Poetic, he mutters, but not especially helpful. The forest thickens ahead, a canopy of green wrapping around the trail like a secret being whispered between branches. You keep walking. Leaves crunch. Birds flit. A squirrel watches you with the silent judgment of someone who doesn't believe you'll make it. In a small clearing, you find a stone bench and a weathered statue of St. James, sword in one hand, shell in the other. Someone has placed a flower crown on his head. You wonder whether he'd mind. Obscure cultural tidbit: in parts of medieval Germany, pilgrims returning from Santiago were greeted by having their feet ceremonial washed, often by local clergy. This wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a ritual acknowledgement that feet, no matter how holy, do smell after 500 miles. You sit on the bench and wiggle your toes. No one rushes out to wash them. Probably for the best. A small group of pilgrims pass by. You recognize one from a few days ago, the woman with the lopsided hat and excellent posture. She nods at you with the mutual respect of those who have both slipped in mud and emerged victorious. Your companion offers her some of the stale bread. She declines politely. Smart woman. As the light begins to shift, the trees part to reveal another village, this one larger, with red mina-styled roofs and actual signs pointing toward pilgrim lodging. Luxury. You descend slowly, your sandal held together by sheer will and the piece of your shirt. The innkeeper greets you with a grin. He gestures to the shelf into your cloak and says, Bivendinvis, Caminanti. You smile. You've been called worse. Morning greets you with the creak of wooden shutters and the faint smell of garlic from someone's leftover dinner. You blink your way into awareness, tucked beneath a scratchy blanket in a room full of softly snoring strangers. A few sunlight strands sneak through the slats and land on your face, like inquisitive fingers. You rise, not because you want to, but because the day insists. You fold your blanket, stretch like a cat impersonating a monk, and step outside where the sky is already wearing its best blue. Your companion waits with a cup of something warm that may or may not be tea. You sip. It tastes like leaves and effort. He tells you it's infused with spirit, which you suspect is a euphemism for whatever he found near the road. Today's road winds along a series of rolling hills, dotted with low stone walls and fig trees that still aren't ready to give up their fruit. The morning air is thick with birdsong, as if the forest is trying to overcompensate for how many miles remain. You walk. Major historical fact: by the height of the pilgrimage movement in the 12th and 13th centuries, entire guidebooks had been written for pilgrims. The most famous Codex Calixtinus included everything from miracle stories to practical advice on where to stay, what to eat, and how to avoid bad people pretending to be monks. One page even suggests not drinking the river water near Estella. You're miles from Estella, but you eye the next stream with suspicion anyway. The sun climbs higher. You pass a pair of shepherds arguing in hushed tones over a goat who seems entirely uninterested in their debate. Your companion suggests the goat is probably the real landowner, just pretending to chew grass while secretly judging humanity. You believe it. A few hours in, you come to a fork in the path. One side looks slightly shorter. The other has better shade and, more importantly, the sound of rushing water. You choose the shaded one. This is what being an adult looks like now: strategic tree decisions. Obscure cultural tidbit: in medieval France, some pilgrims believed that counting their steps while reciting prayers allowed added spiritual points to the journey. This led to a lot of muttered math, especially uphill. Sadly, no one seems to know what the actual reward was: salvation, maybe, or just better sleep. You reach a tiny stone chapel tucked into a hillside. No roof, no door, just ivy and memory. Inside, a rusted iron lantern hangs from what used to be a beam. Beneath it, dozens of scallop shells, some painted, some carved, some just left like quiet signatures. Your companion adds one from his pack. You don't ask when he found it, or why HES carried it this far. He shrugs and says, "Felt like the right spot." You nod. The wind stirs the ivy gently, and for a moment, you could swear you hear singing. Then again, it might just be the goats. After lunch, such as it is, half a crust, one olive, and a fig that finally gave up, you set out once more, stomach humming a tune called "This Is Not Enough." The sun is less forgiving now, and the road turns dry and gravelly. Each step crunches like an old parchment being unrolled. You pass a man walking barefoot, carrying his boots like trophies. He nods at you, grinning with either enlightenment or mild delirium. Your companion offers him a raisin. The man accepts it like a jewel and disappears around a bend, humming to the horizon. You walk on. The terrain flattens into a plain lined with poplars, their leaves flickering like coins in a breeze that feels more decorative than cooling. Dust rises with every step. You can now taste history in your teeth. Major historical fact: in some pilgrimage towns, enterprising individuals set up temporary tattered stalls, well, the medieval equivalent. These pilgrim marks were pressed or branded onto skin or cloth to serve as proof of completion, particularly in places like Jerusalem. Think of it as an early version of a passport stamp, just with more potential for infection. You find a small fountain nestled beneath a tree. Someone has tied a bundle of herbs above it: lavender, maybe, or sage. The water tastes faintly sweet, as if the fountain remembers every pilgrim who ever passed and decided to be kind to you in particular. You soak your feet. You sigh like someone who briefly understands the meaning of life. Your companion does the same, although his sigh is more theatrical and ends with, "I should have been a monk." Obscure cultural tidbit: there's an old folk belief originating near Galicia that pilgrims who dream of owls will find love at the end of their journey. No one agrees whether this love is metaphorical, divine, or just a really friendly baker named Isabel. You consider faking an owl dream, just in case. Evening draws near. The sky softens from hard blue to dusty gold. A breeze finally decides to earn its keep, and you let it wrap around your sun-minus sore limbs like an apology. Ahead, another village. This one has proper chimneys, a few crooked lanterns, and miraculously a small tavern marked with a scallop carved in wood. Inside, a woman pours wine that tastes like dusty cherries and asks no questions. The stew is mostly potato, and you are deeply grateful for every lumpy spoonful. You eat beside a crackling fire while your companion writes something in a tiny notebook. You didn't know he kept one. He looks up and says only, "You snore like an exhausted dragon." You toast to that. Then, full of potatoes and not much else, you sleep. You wake to the sound of someone sweeping. The broom scratches gently against the floor, rhythmic and steady, like a lullaby played in reverse. Outside, the sky is still deciding whether it wants to be dawn or something more poetic. You decide not to wait for it to make up its mind. Your companion is already up, of course, sharing stale bread with a black cat who looks like it runs the village. "Meet our hostess," he says. "She controls the weather." You nod. It tracks. Breakfast is humble, just goat cheese and something that might once been a plum. Still, after days of eating things that were once described with shrugging hand gestures, you've come to appreciate anything not described as adventurous. You set out with the sun finally waking up behind you, sending long shadows ahead like ghosts scouting the road. The fields stretch golden and sleepy on both sides. Occasionally, a scarecrow watches you pass, arms wide like it's been waiting all year to welcome pilgrims back. Major historical fact: the scallop show, so famous now as the symbol of the Camino de Santiago, was not only a badge of completion, but also a practical tool. Pilgrims used them as bowls, spoons, and even as currency in some places. It was like having a medieval Swiss Army souvenir with better aesthetics. You spot a shell tied to a fence post with a red ribbon. Probably left by someone who had too undecided one was enough. You keep walking. The land undulates gently, like a lullaby disguised as geography. The sky is cloudless, the kind that makes you squint just to remind yourself the heavens aren't entirely friendly. Your companion starts humming again. You think it might be or a drinking song. The line between the two is, historically speaking, razor-minus thin. Obscure cultural tidbit: in 114th-century Spanish town, pilgrims were required to carry a wooden staff with a hollow center not to store water or food, but a rolled-up letter from their local priest certifying that they weren't just wandering beggars with stylish hats. No letter? No bed for you. You wonder how many fake scrolls were so behind bonds. You stop at a ridge just before noon. Below, a ruined monastery clings to the edge of a hill, its stone arches like half-minus closed eyes. You walk down quietly, as though the monks might still be dreaming inside. The walls are warm under your hand. Someone has etched a scallop shell beside the doorway. Inside, wildflowers grow through the floor, defiant and lovely. A rusted censer hangs from a beam, swaying gently in the breeze, even though there's no wind. Your companion kneels briefly. Not a prayer exactly, more like a nod. You do the same. Then back to the road. Back to the dust. Back to the long, slow unfolding of one foot in front of the other. It's almost a dance now. A sleepy, blistered, uncoordinated dance. But a dance all the same. The day grows louder birds, Cartwheels in the distance, the rustle of leaves above, as if someone's flipping through the pages of an enormous book. You follow the path along a low stone wall, beyond which sheep graze like fluffy punctuation marks. The village you approach is old in that particularly Spanish way: roofs of red tile, crooked doors painted blue, vines climbing the facades like they are trying to escape gravity. A faded fresco of St. James looks down from the wall of the village church, expression unreadable. You take a seat beneath it. Your companion trades one of his hand carved buttons for a jar of pickled onions from a local boy. The boy seems thrilled. Your companion eats for in a row, then deeply regrets his optimism. You find a quiet corner to rest your feet. An old woman sits nearby, humming to a spinning wheel. She nods at you, then mutters something in Galician that sounds like either a blessing or a warning about fermented plums. Possibly both. Major historical fact: by the 11th century, the pilgrimage routes to Santiago were so well traveled that in specifically catering to pilgrims, called hospices were established. These weren't just shelters, but places of medical care, spiritual guidance, and the occasional suspicious stew. You pass one such hospice, now abandoned but still standing, its wooden sign faded but legible. The scallop shell is carved deep into the lintel. Someone has left flowers at the door. Obscure cultural tidbits. There are medieval records of pilgrims tying pieces of their own clothing to trees near certain shrines, believing it would cure their ailments or grant protection. Imagine a holy forest of patchwork leaves and sock fragments, gently flapping in the wind. You pass just such a tree. Bits of cloth flutter in soft rhythm. One piece is still bright red. You walk a little slower. Later, the road climbs steeply. You stop halfway to rest, sitting on a rock that's probably held every tired backside between here and eternity. Your companion takes out the last of the goat cheese and offers you the bigger half. You both eat in silence, watching the light stretch longer. At the top of the hill, the view unfolds a long green valley, ribboned with the path you've been tracing for days. Beyond it, a distant glimmer rooftops, towers, the faint suggestion of bells. Not quite Santiago, but close enough that your breath catches. Your companion whispers, "We're nearly there." And somehow, you believe it. You descend the hill as dusk arrives, soft and golden and full of birds you can't name. A dog barks from somewhere unseen. A bell rings once, twice, then stops. The village you reach has no tavern, no hospice, no frescoed wall. Just 3 houses and a chapel, no bigger than a stable. But the door opens, and you are greeted with warm bread and a bowl of something spiced and slow cooked. You sleep that night in the loft above a donkey stall, surrounded by straw, stars through the slats, and the quiet rustle of feathers from a nesting hen nearby. It is perfect. The final morning rises slow, like an old monk stretching his knees. You wake not to sound, but to stillness, one of those rare dawns where even the birds have agreed to sleep in. You lie still for a moment, listening to the wood of the beans creak above your head, the soft snore of the donkey below, and the faint whisper of your companion muttering something that might be a prayer or a breakfast order to the universe. Outside, the path is waiting. The air smells faintly of damp earth and rosemary. The sky is pale lavender, as if it too has walked a long road and would now like some tea and a nap. You eat in silence. Bread. Cheese. A pair that squishes more than crunches. Then you shoulder your pack one last time. Your companion eyes his boots with deliberate care, as if each knot carries a small vow. You both nod and step forward. Major historical fact: the cathedral at Santiago de Compostela was believed to house the relics of St. James, the Apostle. For medieval pilgrims, reaching it was more than a journey, it was salvation with blisters. Pilgrims who arrived could attend the famed boat a few mile au mass, where an enormous incense burner would swing above their heads, symbolically purifying their long-minus suffering souls. The day is warm, not hot, just warm enough to remind you that comfort is real and fleeting. You follow the road as it curves gently through the hills. Each bend reveals something familiar: the goat pasture from 3 days ago, the stone cross you mistook for a mile marker, the tree where your companion trident failed to sing to a bird. The rhythm of your steps matches your breath. Everything is slow, gentle, reverent in the quietest way. Obscure cultural tidbit: in parts of Galicia, it was common for pilgrims to burn their walking clothes upon arrival at the cathedral, an act of both purification and poetic spite. Nothing says him reborn like setting your socks on fire. You reach the final ridge just before noon. Below you, the towers of Santiago rise like a dream someone remembered in stone. The rooftops shimmer faintly. A bell tolls in the distance, clear, slow, and impossibly kind. You descend together, past gardens, past arches, past shopkeepers who barely look up. They've seen thousands like you. And then you're there. The square unfolds like a breath held too long. The cathedral stands before you, unapologetically grand. Its facade is covered in saints and spirals and stories carved in stone. Your companion says nothing, just sits. So do you. You don't cry. Not exactly. But your eyes water in that way that suggests your soul might be doing something dramatic behind your back. You step inside. Cool air. Candlelight. The scent of waxened wooden centuries of whispered prayers. You find the silver star in the floor, the one Pilgrims touch as proof. You kneel. You press your fingers to it. And in that moment, you are more than just tired feet and sunburned shoulders. You are part of something enormous and silent and slow. You did it. Now, my friend, you can rest. The story has brought you to its last page, and the road has gently folded itself behind your footsteps. Let the weight of your imaginary satchel slide from your shoulders. Let the echoes of bells fade like the last note of a lullaby. Your legs no longer ache. Your breath is soft and slow. You are no longer walking, but floating somewhere between the sleepy hills of Galicia and the quiet corners of your own imagination. Picture that last evening again, a wooden bench beneath a fig tree. The taste of warm bread in your mouth. The scent of herbs and old stone. A sky streaked with fading amber, and the soft shuffle of other pilgrims returning home. Even the dust seems to settle just for you. You close your eyes beneath cathedral arches, but the world continues to hum gently around you like a lullaby wrapped in candle smoke and time-worn frescoes. The scallop shell still rests in your hand, light as a promise and twice as patient. You made it, and you are allowed to rest now. Let the road vanish behind you like mist over morning fields. Let your breath deepen, your mind loosen, your spirit rock gently in the cradle of an ancient path walked by thousands before you. Sleep, dear traveler. Sleep like someone who has arrived.